Welcome. This is the Founders Atlas, a podcast exploring entrepreneurship around the world through the eyes of visionary founders. I'm your host, Mayuri Reddy. Today, we're traveling to Abu Dhabi, UAE, a city at the center of the Middle East's growing innovation landscape, where investments in AI, sustainability, and emerging tech are helping shape the future of how we live and learn. My guest is Maryam Hassani, head of trends and innovation at the Abu Dhabi Childhood Authority, co-founder of Hydro Wind Energy, and a Forbes 30 under 30 honoree. She's someone who embodies the idea of falling in love with the journey of building, using each experiment, success, or setback as a chance to get sharper, faster, and way more curious. At the time of the conversation, Maryam was building Zealous, an AI-powered tool that was designed to make website testing faster and more intuitive. What makes this episode so powerful isn't just what she was building, but how she was thinking. She discusses why she believes failure is important, the role of community, how to build sustainable AI solutions, and why she is excited for what the future holds. This episode is a reminder that entrepreneurship isn't only about what lasts, it's about what we learn along the way. I'm so excited for you to meet her. Welcome. This is the Founders Atlas. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Founders Atlas. Today, I am so excited to have Maryam Hassani, the CEO of Zealous. She is based in Abu Dhabi, UAE. Maryam, it's so wonderful to have you. I'm so glad we were able to make this work.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Honestly, I'm super excited for our conversation today.
Me too. Before we get super into the nitty gritty, I always start with this question. What is Zealous and what is the problem that you're looking to solve?
Yeah, so Zetis has been in the works for quite some time, and I think it's evolved as I learned more about the market and specifically zeroing in on a big enough and painful enough need. And currently, where it stands is that we provide AI testing for web stores or websites, e-commerce more specifically at the moment. But essentially, we found this gap in the market where there's a lot of potential for innovation, particularly within AI, in the space of testing. So testing websites, testing web applications, and so on. And we feel like that's really been our sweet spot, and we're further developing the product in that space.
Amazing. And have you had a lot of experience in AI prior to starting Zealous? Like, what led you on the path to building this company within the AI space?
I mentioned it's been in the works for quite some time. So I think it was a little over 2 years now that I thought, obviously we're hearing a lot about AI. ChatGPT had just launched to the world. And I thought to myself, what is a better way to learn about a new technology than to actually build in it?
Mm.
And so under the umbrella of Zealous, we built quite a few products, but I think the one that we're most excited about is the website tester, just because, like I said, it really depends on whether there's a big enough problem or a need in the market. And we feel like this could be the one that satisfies that.
Amazing. I mean, yeah, I feel like every other day we hear of a lot of different AI tools, and I think a lot of investors are really excited to give money to founders that are willing to build in that space. I'm curious for you, obviously you're building in Abu Dhabi, which for me, I'm based in Berlin, and I hear a lot about Dubai, right? Like Dubai is, I think, the city that a lot of folks will not only think about moving to, but also go to vacation in. Abu Dhabi, I don't know as much about. And I think a lot of people don't know about the scene there. So could you maybe share a little bit about what is not only the state of AI in Abu Dhabi and the UAE, but perhaps why you chose to build your company in Abu Dhabi versus Dubai or maybe another city in MENA?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just to preface, my company is actually based in Dubai, and I'm between the two Emirates. So spending time here, you'll come to realize they're very close, just about an hour and 15 or 30 minutes away from each other by car. But what's really distinct is the ecosystem that they attract. So Dubai, having started earlier, has always been very, very dedicated to the entrepreneurial space and really attracting just passionate, interesting builders and talent to the region, and being a place that they also feel they can have a great lifestyle and really set roots. Abu Dhabi, I would say, is sort of at a different pace. I like to describe it as, you get attracted to the region through Dubai. At the time, you're probably, a bachelor, unmarried, and just, getting your career started. But I think once you get yourself established and you get married, you start your family, you probably would gravitate more towards Abu Dhabi, which has a different pace of
Mm,
life and also even a different tourism strategy. You see a lot of family tourism, and that sort of feel there at a slower pace. And I think that that's great because it really caters to the full lifeline of an individual who'd want to move to the region.
yeah.
Also, the differences you see is that Dubai, potentially attracts companies more in the blockchain, fintech type technologies. Also, tourism, prop tech are big themes in Dubai as well. Whereas Abu Dhabi, I think, looks more at sustainability, really going heavy on AI as well at the moment in terms of investment and infrastructure.
Mm,
You have big names and big players in the field based out of Abu Dhabi. And so I feel like they have a very interesting balance.
mm.
Whoever you may be, whatever your interest may be, if you're an entrepreneur in any industry, you'll find your place either in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, or perhaps even another emirate.
That's so interesting that even within the very small geographic space, that they are only an hour and 15 minutes away, that they can have such unique ecosystems, that they're really catering to different types of businesses, and that you're also seeing people evolve with that as well. I love that what you were saying of there's actually like an opportunity to sort of grow your business and grow your career in a way that makes sense for the pace of life that you're at or the stage of life that you're at. And I did not know that about Abu Dhabi. The information that I have of Dubai has always been very much right, like in real estate or very, very fast paced. But I think that Abu Dhabi also, from what you're saying, seems like a place where there feels a little bit more settling that can happen, which could be very appealing to a lot of entrepreneurs that are really trying to build something long term. What do you see as the future of AI, not just in Abu Dhabi, and what do you see as the potential opportunities that you for the next maybe year or a couple of years?
I mean, from the first time I heard about AI, I knew it was going to be big. We've had these waves of technology, for example, with blockchain, cryptocurrency, and so on. But I don't think any have really changed the foundations of industries as we've seen with AI and the heavy, heavy investment in terms of infrastructure
Mm,
to really take advantage and see the complete opportunities with this new technology. I think it can be quite an equalizer or leveling the playing field of the region in comparison to other markets. I think it's a great way to bridge that gap or shorten that gap that you see in emerging ecosystems and emerging economies. I think the real equalizing effect is going to be how fast you can adopt and how fast you can upskill the current workforce in those markets. And there's just great opportunity because the MENA region itself is majority youth based and
mm.
with a very high internet penetration. I think we have the ingredients to really take this to the next level and see the full opportunities and use cases of this new technology.
How many of the folks that are building AI businesses in Abu Dhabi are first time entrepreneurs? I'm actually quite curious for you. Are a lot of people in the ecosystem also starting out as this their first business, or do you see also folks getting into AI maybe later on in their careers?
I think just given the ecosystem, Dubai, like I said, is a bit had an earlier start, let's say, than Abu Dhabi in the entrepreneurial space. So I feel like you do see a lot more of repeat entrepreneurs, and I think that's super healthy. Just as in terms of building an ecosystem, there has to be the
Yeah.
first wave, and there you see even in other markets like Silicon Valley, there's a kind of like a waterfall effect. Once a
Mhm.
company becomes successful, it waterfalls into creating more companies and so on. This recycling happens, and that's really the basis of a healthy ecosystem. I think you see that with Dubai, where you have repeat founders. But I think in terms of a technology, if you're not building an AI company, it's like saying back when apps became a thing. It's like saying that I'm a mobile company. No one says that anymore. It's
Mm.
kind of like a given just because that's where the whole space has progressed to. So I think while it's still maybe something new and people are tinkering with it, they say AI company, but I wouldn't be surprised that in the next year or two, you don't even mention your company's AI because it's a given.
Yeah. Just thinking about this as well, first time we had a chat, you mentioned a lot of the initiatives that UAE is also doing around sustainability. And lately, there's been a lot of conversation around AI and also responsible AI, how it can actually be problematic if it's not built in a way that can counteract the energy that's used. AI and sustainability has often been seen as conflicting. Is there any initiatives that are going on in the UAE around solving that problem? And is there any conversation around how those problems can be tackled together in a way that's cohesive?
100%. And I think given how we're situated in the world, obviously, we have sustainability as a core theme of just everything we built so far as a very young country. Sustainability has always been at the heart of it. I think you see that through initiatives, and you see that through even the key values and identity of our nation when it comes to resilience and growth and having that mindset of resourcefulness. And so I think in the case of AI, that's something that was very deeply reflected on from the get-go. And I think with what you're seeing in terms of initiatives being launched now, whether it be in solar energy, nuclear energy, and so on, it's really, you see this trend even worldwide where we understand the value of having AI as a technology, but we also understand that to truly be able to unlock the full potential, we need to rethink how we generate energy and making sure that we generate it in a thoughtful and clean way.
Absolutely. And so when you're looking at your business, what are some of the ways that you're tackling that as well? Or are there support systems that you have that give you the tools to be able to think through those
I
problems?
think there's a lot of awareness and learning opportunities in our ecosystem. I myself had done an executive education program with the Mohammed bin Zayed University for AI. Yes, we have a university dedicated to AI,
Love that. Of course you do.
based in Abu Dhabi. And I think really the core value there is they've been thinking about this um, very deeply, and they want to ensure that as again we take advantage of this new technology, we're also at a place where we understand its not just its potential, but its potential pitfalls as well
Yeah,
for those that we're bringing products into the space for. So this is something that I think very deeply about as well. And you see how this kind of evolves into products. So you see products that are algorithmic based. So for example, predicting things like employment opportunity or ability to know uh, who is best positioned to pay back loans and those sort of things. So these sort of products and software you see in very important industries like banking, the talent industry and workforce, insurance, and so on. That's where I would say there has to be more thoughtful regulation and
mm,
policies around, and just at least understanding of the core of the algorithm itself. So those who would be depending on this algorithm, those within the industry, should have full knowledge of how it works so they
yeah,
can truly understand whether it's producing or recommending something that is safe and that is protecting uh, those that it's affecting. So I feel that is something that has to be taken into account. As zealous personally, this is something we of course are very mindful of, but within the technology that we're in, which is testing web applications and software, it's a very low risk
mm,
use of AI, and which is why we like it so much. Is that it's a very prominent fix to a very annoying problem, which is
yeah.
having to do the same thing over and over in terms of testing key functionality of your website. Less risk definitely for us, but I think just being knowledgeable of AI and how it works is something everyone should be responsible for, and different industries that are particularly at risk.
Absolutely. And I think that we're starting to see a lot more regulations come about with AI, which I think can be good. Often, like sometimes I get like stunned by how much it has evolved in just a couple of years. And I look at it from my parents. My parents are in their early 70s and they can't tell the difference between an AI picture and a non AI picture anymore. There are also a lot of tasks that they don't realize have been run by AI, that their customer service chatbot is not actually a human being, that a lot of the things that they're using on a regular basis have already been optimized with AI, and it's actually already been a part of our lives in ways that we didn't know already. So, for you, when you're navigating these changes and regulations, what are the things that people should be looking at if they are looking to build a business in AI? And are there any specific resources that you use or utilize to ensure that you're staying ahead of the game and aware of the constant developments that are happening?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think so far you see the space being quite active in terms of the regulations and policymakers that they want to be ahead of the game. We're still uncovering use cases um, and different opportunities in the space almost every day. We're very lucky to have policy and industry almost side by side, and you really
Mm.
see um, the strong presence of government officials and policymakers to really just be open to the idea of, okay, how best can we explore this, but also ensuring that once a product comes into the market, that it's safe and it's thoughtful in how it's designed. But I think it still rests on those that are creating the products, number one, and number two, those that will be relying on the products. I think there is a responsibility for those in industry before adopting an AI technology or a software product that has specifically an algorithmic or prediction based service, that they should truly understand how it works and also understand if it works for their market and their beneficiaries. Because what you find as well is, I mean, obviously the basis of AI is data, and the majority of this data is produced in the West. And you would think that it also has baked in, biases, ideologies. That's just the way that it works. And I think
Yeah.
as a human, once you read through news feeds or you're able to absorb data, you yourself can tell, how it should be best augmented to meet your market's needs and so on. So I think that's really where I find us, we're all on this, we're essentially all on the same boat when it comes to that. And I think that realization and that willingness to learn and even question and really try to make sense of how best to use these products and services and also when not to use them is very important.
What I've really been gaining already from our conversation is there's a lot of openness and a lot of exploration that is seems very key in the way that you've built your company, but also seems to be a bit of the culture of UAE as well, right? This very forward thinking when it comes to looking at how to build these products in a not only sustainable, responsible way, to look a little bit forward ahead of the game. And I'm curious of how much that has influenced the way that you've built your business. How has Emirati culture had an influence on your perspective of what it means to be an entrepreneur or a leader? And are there traditions or values from your culture that you've integrated into your business or the way that you speak to partners?
Yeah, I think being a Malati and just observing our leadership, I think is a great testament to the kind of in community and population that we have here. It's really an openness, like you said, and also a curiosity to see how best can we utilize these resources and these new technologies in a way that I think fundamentally it's not having a fear to try, and this openness to what some would consider, something negative as, for example, failure. I think for us, it's really about learning. It's a learning experience. And I think this is rooted in we wouldn't have gotten this far if we didn't have this sort of mentality and really this openness and support and in our leadership is what we rely on. We've always been encouraged to dream big, try to achieve, the biggest of feats. And I think it really just boils down to that. And also just seeing and having opportunities and platforms to have discourse with others. I think that's super important. Being able to have access to, very smart individuals that now call the UAE home. I think
Yeah,
it is a great opportunity for us as Emiratis as well to have that outlet, to have discourse, to learn from others, and all happening, within platforms and within spaces that our leadership and our government has created for us.
it's wonderful. Is there a kind of general spirit around entrepreneurship that's taught at a younger age? I mean, you already mentioned that failure is something that you really see as a lesson. And as someone who grew up as American, failure was not something that was preached to us in the same way. Hustle culture is a very big part of the way that Americans are taught how to think about their careers. but not failure. Failure is not celebrated in that way. So, curious for you, was following a pathway of entrepreneurship and the potential for failure, was that ever something that scared you? Was it something that you always looked to do? Or was it something that came about as you developed a greater interest in AI and exploring this?
I think it was really rooted in learning. Honestly, I think just starting off in the space, I started, designing and operating programs for startups. So how do we attract promising startups, help them set up here, and so on. So I had kind of like that government hat on. And then through policy making in this space, how can we best create the most flexible and open regulations for these companies to feel comfortable and unlock barriers that they may have in the market. And then finally, kind of complementing all those diverse experiences with being a founder myself. And I feel like I've always kind of thrived to have diverse perspectives within the field because I think that's truly a value point. Why shall I assume that I have, the best understanding of my beneficiaries, which are at the time the startup ecosystem,
Yeah.
how best to, build for them and make sure what I suggest in terms of policies and programs are best suited for them if I didn't have myself that experience. And so I think that openness to learning and progression is truly at the heart of it. And then once you realize that failure or trying essentially or trying multiple times in terms of frequency is the only way that you can truly progress, you then have a different understanding and feeling towards what people say failure is,
Yeah, of course.
where it's truly at the heart of it learning. And I think if you're looking at the country and how it's been built and continues to be built, it's been on this incredible, progression journey, and it hasn't stopped. So when you realize that we're all moving in tandem as an individual or as a member of the community and of the population, you realize, why not also continue to move in that same pace, which is an incredible pace as well.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful way of putting it, that learning is essentially a big core value of what it means to be Emirati. And that might be a reason why you've been able to accelerate your progression as quickly as you have. I use that as a contrast to I live in Germany, and it's a country where a lot of processes are incredibly slow. There's a lot of fear of failure. There's a lot of fear of change and optimization. Versus my family is from India, and I see that a country like India, which is one of the largest countries on the planet, is faster at optimizing than Germany because they just kind of keep going. They keep
Mhm.
trying and they know things might not
It's
work. But if you keep trying, you will find a solution faster than waiting for everything to be perfect. Yeah.
experimentation is really at the heart of it. So once you realize the deep connection of the pace of your learning is a product of how frequent you experiment and try new things, it kind of goes hand in hand. And obviously, there's always going to be failure in that. But when you think when you think or reframe it in a way where it's just a natural part of that learning process, you really change your perspective.
Yeah. It's great. I think you've already kind of answered it, but of course, there are a lot of challenges that come up with building a business. What are some of the ways that you approach problem solving that have helped you be resilient in those ups and downs?
I think it's also being comfortable. I mean, one thing personally I learned how to do through this experience is not be too attached to assumptions.
Mm.
I think as humans, we try to hang on to those. I think you come into a space with maybe predisposed assumptions. Oh, the customers would love this, like I would love this. But when you quickly realize how humbling it is to actually get a product or an early MVP version of the product in front of potential customers, and truly understanding like how best to ask to see if they're actually interested in it, it's
Mm,
super humbling
mm,
because you realize like that it's not about you wanting to, you know, reconfirm your assumptions, but it's rather you wanting to just, like I said, progress and getting closer and closer to the truth. Because I think
yeah,
that in any industry, the market, I mean, I truly believe the market is the true indicator of truth. But you want to also be open enough and maybe courageous enough to keep trying and see what sticks. And it's also in the way that you ask questions. and how open you are to, let's say, being wrong in your assumptions. Once again you kind of have that flow in place and that openness, it's very liberating. And when you bring that kind of mentality to other parts of your life and your career and your work and potential other industries, you see that it's quite it's quite an important trait to have and skill to have in today's world, that just because of how fast it's moving.
How do you manage your expectations or pivot for the betterment of the business?
There's a really good visual on this. It's like the lifeline of an entrepreneur. When you realize that statistically, for every great company, they had to pivot on average at least 2 to 3 times, you then quickly realize that what you really want is to get to the next pivot.
Yeah.
That then becomes your goal. It becomes, okay, how can I test this in the fastest, easiest way possible so I can get to unlock the next step, which is probably going to get closer. So it's about getting closer and closer to the truth. And you realizing that no one got it right the first time.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's a very good way to put it. So failing faster, not even necessarily failing faster, but getting to the answers faster is actually the real
Learning fast.
benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
very
and
cool.
making sure you have that like consistent iterative process.
Absolutely. And as you've been building this business, what has been the support system that you've had around you? Maybe from a professional standpoint of the team that you have around you, but also personal. So maybe the friends or larger network of family that you have, and how is that? How do you lean on them when you need that guidance or support?
Yeah, I think that's a great question to ask, because I think it's really important. Being a founder is, maybe they don't tell you this on purpose, but it's it's a very hard and difficult journey. I think part of it's also that you you need to be um, maybe a bit too optimistic to actually enter, and to stay, because then it's an incredible, like, don't get me wrong, it's an incredibly rewarding journey. But I think to really get through the pitfalls, which are inevitable, you need a strong community around you.
Mm.
And I think what I'm blessed to be part of, or at least be in an ecosystem that has a lot of these communities and groups. A lot of them came to be very organically. So meeting frequently, having people I can, send messages to and just ask them for advice. And I think it's also important to look to those at the same stage as you, or just a few steps ahead, as opposed to, the unicorn founder that exited and is, 10 steps ahead of you. Because the ones closer to you, I think, is where you really see or get advice on how to get to just the next milestone, right? A lot of the time you just want to get to the next stage or to the next pivot. And for me, that's been very valuable. I personally learn really well from others. And I actually truly love to learn from others. So having that opportunity to have these conversations, be part of these communities, and just you realize the openness of founders to then help others, because they would have had someone who helped them at their time of need. I think is just incredible. It's almost like you don't want anyone to make the mistake that you made. And a lot of the times, interestingly enough, in a first time founder experience, a lot of the mistakes are repeated. As a first time founder, usually you come in with preset assumptions, and it takes a bit of time to realize that, it's not about validating your assumptions, but actually getting to the truth. And then the next time around, it gets better and better. So you naturally want to save that first time founder from making that same mistake.
Absolutely. There's so many benefits to having that support system. And again, a lot of it is actually just saving some time to not make the same mistake that so many others who entered the exact same market were doing. For you, if you were to start the business again, or if you were to give advice to somebody who is looking to enter the market in Abu Dhabi, what's a piece of advice that you would give them?
I think I would tell them to firstly just get started and really focus on what is the fastest, easiest way to test the problem. To test that the problem is in fact painful enough, in fact big enough, to dedicate time and resources into building something to solve for it. I think that's it's like the first step, or step zero, to getting started. Because only once you can validate that, you can make sure you have a problem big enough, you have a problem that's painful enough that users would actually try and find a solution for, and ideally, pay money for. If it's a startup, you want to be able to make it revenue generating as soon as
Yeah.
possible. And so that would be my number one step. But I would also kind of give them um, maybe a piece of advice, which is do not overbuild. Like,
Mm.
try to do it in the most lean way possible. And I think we're very blessed, in fact, with today's AI tools, even to be able to build much faster, and with a lot less resources than before. Like, just saying, okay, well, let me make sure this is an actual painful enough problem to dedicate what's usually the next, 8 to 10 years of someone's life building a startup to solve for it.
Yeah, that's a very, very great point. There are so many folks that spend so much time on creating what they think is the perfect MVP, not realizing that they actually needed to test it with customers or clients first and really make sure that what they were building was responding the way they wanted it to, was the product that people were actually envisioning when they were thinking about the problem they needed solved. And you're so right. There are incredible tools that exist now. I mean, you can type in a prompt and get a landing page done in about 5 seconds now. So it's so
Exactly.
easy these days that it'd be a missed opportunity to not utilize AI even as a tool to get started on, creating your first MVP or just testing out what people might need.
Yeah. But I think
Um,
even deeper than that, asking the right questions, like just off the get-go, how do you know that a problem is painful enough? And there's a great book, and it's even free online as a resource. It's called The Mom Test.
I was just about to ask if that was what
And I continue to recommend this book that is so, so simple and so short, but it's so jam-packed with like gems of advice, because it's so interesting. It really gets down to the psychology of a human being. We have this tendency to try and jump ahead, try and get, you know, skip ahead from validating the problem straight into ideas.
Mm,
I think it's just maybe a natural process within our human minds. But what I found is that when you take a few steps back and you realize, like, in the full picture view, how things need to happen for it to truly, like, you get to your end goal, you kind of rewire your brain.
yeah.
Start thinking like that. To start thinking, okay, first things first, let's validate the problem. Let's have conversations. It's really at the root of that. Like, how can you speak to your potential customers and truly make sure that this is something they want solved? Because
Yeah.
dedicating, like I said, years of your life to doing so. And the idea might change. You're going to iterate on the idea. Maybe it's not the best way to solve for that problem, but the problem will have to be, something big enough and solidified enough for you to then start your iteration process around ideas to solve for it. So it's really, like I said, it's something you see a lot of first time founders make the mistake of, because it's almost like a natural instinct to do. But I think once again, you speak to more founders within the community and those that are maybe just a few steps ahead of you, you learn a lot.
100%. It's so funny you were mentioning the mom test. I have it on my coffee table.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And my brother was actually here the other day and he was like, "Is that your copy or mine?" So he also has
Oh,
it as
I
well.
love that.
Yeah, so definitely a great book to have. And we're getting towards a little bit of the end, and I wanted to get a few questions in to sort of related to potential investors that are, or perhaps really anybody who's looking to enter the market but doesn't know exactly how to navigate it. So, if you were speaking to an investor, what are some challenges or barriers that they should be aware of if they're looking to expand their portfolio in the region? And how can they best navigate that?
Yeah, I think the region is quite an interesting space to come into. And I think just historically, the way that companies have come to form, again, I think it goes back to this, fundamental um, values of resourcefulness, resilience, and so on. The companies are almost always really well built in terms of the unit economics of how the company works. Right, like
Mm,
they always think in that way, in that resourcefulness type of way. And I mean, yes, the market in the UAE is, still perhaps nuanced and quite small, but I think realizing the larger potential of the region, which I think is going more and more towards making it easier to scale into, which is great because I think there's a huge potential of the market as a whole. as a company and doing so, and of course as an investor. And I think if you're an investor from a different market or entering into the space, focusing on what true value you can bring in terms of supporting a company to either scale more effectively, refining their products more effectively is really important. I think what I really like to see is an investor that adds more value than just capital,
Yeah.
and that's truly what's needed, I think, for our ecosystem to grow.
Amazing. I think that I'm sensing that shift as well from a lot of folks too that I've spoken to recently of, you're building a company and a cap table with somebody who's going to be a part of the building of your company and the pivots and the downfalls and the ups. And you need to have people on board that are not only going to be a financial contributor, but also a support system, not just in their network, but their advice and their, I guess, belief that you're able to go through those things. And I guess if you don't have a investor that's able to add value, there's, again, if you have a great product and there's a lot of money coming from different directions, there needs to be something that distinguishes them. And now that you're thinking of, your own business, how do you envision your business scaling? And do you think about how you want to scale it globally? And are you looking for investment at this point right now? And if so, how do you see investors playing into that journey?
Yeah, so I think very early on in this product, the website AI automated tester product, particularly in the e-commerce space, we really thought about scalability from the get-go. We thought, okay, how can we build a product that can create value for any website or any e-commerce store worldwide? And so the way that we built it is super easy. It's plug and play, right? Like all we actually fundamentally need is a URL. So your website URL and your email, and it sends
Mm,
you daily reports testing all your key functionality. And we also thought, how can we truly differentiate ourselves from what already exists? So you can imagine it's a big space. E-commerce is a very big
massive.
industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what you see is even maybe encouraging enough is that we're not the first people who tried to solve for this or optimize. So you know that there's a big enough market for this, but a lot of the products we saw in the space are optimized towards enterprise,
Mm,
and they've also been built on almost legacy systems that aren't AI native.
mm,
So what we bring to the table is that we cut out arguably the most annoying part of that process, which is having to write test scenarios. So in that process, and obviously we gathered this from talking to people who test websites for a living,
yeah.
owners of
Wow.
e-commerce stores that just want to focus their time on thinking about their next launch of products and not have to worry about their website glitching
Yeah.
for their customers. So what we realized is that that really annoying piece of the process, which is having to write down very specifically what exactly to test. With AI, we could completely eliminate,
Mm,
which cuts down the majority of the time and cost of the testing process.
it's incredible.
So having that in mind and also realizing that it's something that can be applied to, any market was what truly excited us about going forward with this product. And to your question about investors, again, going back on the idea of with AI, you can do so much with very little resources. And I think I'm blessed to have my co-founder and CTO do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to coding.
Mm,
That there's going to be more and more companies, and this is my prediction, that don't really need, the pre-seed seed stage check.
yeah.
So I think I really love this because what it's what it's kind of implying for the investment space in that stage is that they need to really provide a lot of value because companies can now get to revenue generation without having to invest so much in technology just because of how democratized it's been with AI tools.
Yeah.
So personally, we aren't raising, but I think if any investor truly feels like can add value and wants to have a conversation, by all means, we're always open to that. But yeah, I think we're really just focused on revenue generation, making sure our product truly adds value to our customers.
Great. And is are there any other types of partnerships that you are open to? And also, if the listeners are curious to support Zealous or use your product, is it open to anybody, and how would they access getting in contact with you if they want to do a partnership or what have you?
Yeah, we're always happy to talk to to people or individuals or companies interested in our technology. Um, First and foremost, if you're someone with a website, an e-commerce store, anything you just like to test and not have to, bore a human being to test something endlessly on a cycle,
Yeah.
we can help you with that. Our AI tester is ready to go. Like I said, all we need is a URL in your email, and we can start sending you daily reports on key functionality without any need for testing scenarios. And I think we're also interested in exploring other industries. So, like I said, we're currently optimized for the e-commerce space just because we know how important it is to make sure your e-commerce store works perfectly for your customers. The bounce rate and the churn rate on e-commerce stores they're not very forgiving, let's say, when
Yeah.
it comes to lags and issues with your website.
Yeah.
But if there's any other industry that your listeners think our product can add value to, for example, we've been also exploring AI automated testing for video games. So being
Oh,
able to test, yeah, so being able to test to make sure your video games work perfectly. So if you're a video game studio or if you're in any other industry, you think we can add value in just shortening and completely optimizing your testing process, we'd love to hear from you. And you can please reach out to us over our website or even on LinkedIn. We'd love to have a chat.
amazing. And this is my last question. I ask it to everybody. What does success look like to you? And are there any milestones where you'd be like, I'm successful? Or are there any things that you look to as a marker for success?
Yeah, I think for me, I think the success goalpost kind of moves. And I like that it moves. I think now that I have this openness to really just seeing how far we can go and continuously learning, I think is really at the core of it. Maybe I like to set closer goalposts. So just how do we get to the next stage of making sure we're on the right track? So we
Mm.
kind of set ourselves with some metrics to make sure that we are, going in the right direction. For example, once we land on product market fit, that would be a big milestone for us. And then further refining the product. I think just being open to the fact that it's a continuous learning process is quite exciting. And then once you kind of make peace with that, it's just an amazing journey to be on. So highly recommended for those really looking for that opportunity to learn and to grow and to really just dive into the space. The best way to do so is to build.
I love that. That's such a great ending line. Thank you so much for everything you shared. I loved hearing not only the way that you are building the business, but to be honest, what is making me a lot more curious about the UAE, to be honest, of
You
this
have to come
spirit
visit.
of, yeah, the spirit of innovation and learning that comes from just trying, right? Again, there's so many folks that self reject or stop themselves because they're afraid of failing. I've myself been very guilty of that throughout my life. And I think it's so important for us to support one another in finding the excitement that comes from that, right? Just trying does not need to mean that you have to be perfect. Everybody starts as a beginner, and really embodying that seems like a very big part of your culture, and clearly also the way that you operate your business as well. So thank you so much for everything that you shared. I'll also put information in the show notes about how people can get in contact with you. Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning into the Founders Atlas. I hope you enjoyed the ride. To learn more about what Maryam is building, head to our show notes for ways to get in contact with her, as well as how to follow her on LinkedIn. She posts amazing content with a lot of great updates about what's happening in the world of AI. And if you could like, subscribe, follow, give us a rating, anything to show support for the podcast, it means more than you know. This episode is actually the last interview episode of season 1 of the Founders Atlas. I want to say a big thank you to not just Maryam, but the incredible guests I've been able to have on this first season. It has truly been such a privilege to get to know all of you, and I can't wait to follow up with all of them as well as their journeys continue. Next week's episode will be a little bit different. I'll be sharing a little bit more about my insights of season 1. It's the things that anyone who wants to start a podcast needs to know, and how we'll be shaping season 2. Thanks again, and see you next time.